Okay, so let me, gentlemen, would you tell me which mic I'm supposed to have? Is 6 for me or 7 is for me? Okay. All right, sorry about that.
No, it just, there was a multitude of them.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right. All right. Good afternoon. I want to call our September 5th special meeting to on the budget to order. And our meeting today, we're meeting today because Hurricane Idalia, is that the right way? Caused us to have to reschedule this meeting. There was some preparation that was being done for that. And so I had asked that we come together, and the information that we received in July, I didn't feel we got enough information to support the budget, $604 million. And so Mr. Burkett and staff kind of prepared some more stuff. I'm going to hand it to you. Do you have anything else that you want to share with us? Or you want to just entertain questions, or how do you want to go forth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's completely up to you. I could make a few comments if you like and explain a couple of things that I just passed out, if that would
Okay,
help.
I'll let you, yes, sir, go ahead. You can do that, and then.
Okay. First off, just thank you for the opportunity. Is that my mic?
Yeah, it's a little echoey. Okay, he's got his thumbs up there, so try now.
Okay.
Bring it closer to you.
We okay?
Bring it closer to you. You can move it, Mr. Burkett. Kind of slide it to you, the base.
Hear me now? You okay now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, just to start off, just a little bit in review that, we talked at the very start of this process that our concerns that we have, constant concerns that we have with any budget. One is, of course, maintaining our enrollment, and that, of course, will take marketing and promoting our system. And I think what we should do is brand Mrs. McGraw's choo-choo train and have that in the parade going down the street at homecoming. I think that would be great. But also, we're concerned, of course, as we talked about the vouchers starting to impact us when they do take our children out of our class. Charter schools, of course, and our facilities, and what to do and how to rearrange facilities and try to save money. Concerned about our annual increases of employee salary increases, FRS increases in rates, health insurance, property and casualty insurance, changes in enrollment, like we said before, but however, this year it looks like our enrollment, based on our 10-day counts, are up a little bit over our projected, which is a good sign. And utility and fuel cost, of course, and then inflation are major game players in our budget. Now, our budget is completely built on enrollment and based on our staffing plan. So obviously, as our enrollment increases, our budget increases. As our enrollment decreases, our budget decreases, but there's an automatic cut in that because of the way it's funded through our staffing model. There's reductions that are automatic in that at that point, unless those cuts come during the year, and that's a little bit more difficult than normal. But some of the things that we've done in the past when we faced some difficult times is, of course, hiring freezes, high level approval of large purchases, reduction in other expense allocations, and that's hard to do when 90% of your budget is in staff and people with very little discretionary money. That's something you can do to a very small point. Reduction in workforce, closing of facilities, and increasing, of course, as not a solution, but increasing that transfer of bringing more money into the operating fund can offset some of the loss that we may incur, even though we're not anticipating that at this point for this budget, but we know in the future some actions may need to be taken. I just passed out to you, we just finished this calculation, it's still estimates. There's two sheets. One is the estimated June 30th, 2023 fund balance. So you can see if you take our total projected funding, which includes revenue and transfers, now we can subtract transfers out of that figure because a transfer is not a revenue. Use that reduced, just simply revenue figure, divide that into our assigned and unassigned fund balance. Right now, at the end of the year, that calculates to 9.17%. Now, also listed on that sheet was reduction of charter school revenue. We've currently got two opinions on that adjustment to fund balance. We know that we can remove the transfers because it's not a revenue. The charter school revenue, I've got one interpretation from a department head at Bureau in Tallahassee that you can deduct charter school revenue. I've got another opinion, it came in writing from the DOE saying you cannot take the charter school money out. Now, with that being said, currently it looks like we're okay. We're still waiting for that opinion, though, as a backup in case we ever need to do that. I don't know what the final outcome of that's going to be. That was presented at a conference to the Finance Council with the Florida School Finance Officers Association, that some districts were doing that when they were in trouble the last couple of years, their fund balance getting low, they subtracted the charter school revenue out. So whether we can do that is still up for debate. The second sheet is the 2024, June 30th, 2024 estimated ending balance. Now, this is, of course, will be in our budget as far, and this is still, like I say, estimate, it'll change a little bit. But currently, we do that same calculation, take the current year revenues, subtract the transfers, and divide that into our assigned and unassigned balance. It's 8.40% in that calculation. So it's still, it came down a little bit from the June 30th, but it's still good. And one reason you'll see a big change in that fund balance is this year, rather than usually for years and years, we've always had a huge amendment in October where we have a large list of unassigned and restricted balances, and then we appropriate all those dollars back out into the appropriate area. This year, Ms. Ford has reappropriated a lot of that money into the budget, so we will not have that real large amendment in October to reallocate all the categoricals and restricted balances. So that's a little change that you'll see that it's probably better to do that so you don't have an overinflated fund balance of at the beginning of the year. So other than those two things, we did hope you found the information that we passed out to you useful. If you have any questions at this point, I would be happy to, the expert sitting in the audience here, Ms. Ford. So.
Thank you, Mr. Burkett. I actually do have a question. I didn't want to interrupt you because I was hoping I could get where we were. You said we had two opinions on how to handle the transfers to charters, and but I didn't get what we do. Do we back out? We subtract out?
We did not back out the charter school revenue out of the revenue. No, ma'am. We take the more conservative approach, and
which is what DOE was saying.
I know it's firm. What DOE has told me is the transfers, but not the charter school revenue. So we did not subtract the charter school revenue out of that calculation. We're still waiting for a second opinion if it materializes.
So in the past, we've taken the more conservative route. I just want to make sure I understand.
In the past, we're not subtracting transfers. That is correct.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I agree. I was following you there, but I had a couple questions. I'm not on the enrollment, and I don't want to run back out to my car, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to just go back. Do you recall the number? Because the enrollment numbers that were in the May 31st presentation, the projected enrollment numbers, that's one number. And then when we got the projected enrollment numbers that were in the July tentative budget worksheet, I sent you a screenshot of that.
Yes, ma'am.
In the email. And then what is in the August 31st information that I received? Oh, I actually do have it here. I'm having some, I wasn't able to tie those numbers together or to get two to agree.
Well,
the projected numbers, and so, meaning that, and just to catch my colleagues up, I didn't copy you guys on the email, but on, in the tentative budget that we received, the documents doing that here and there, the High Springs Community School elementary enrollment was included in the High Springs area, in the elementary area, and then they were, it's included here in elementary, at 11,830, and then it's included again down at the bottom down here, in this 958. And so I was asking Mr. Burkett if those 619 students were counted twice, and if the revenue was built that was in this information twice, because we've got numbers running all through here. And so I even tried to look and tie out this information here, the July information, to what was here, and I'm not able to get the numbers to
answer your question. The numbers that were used for budget projections were the actual FTE projections sent to Tallahassee. That comes out of Ms. Neal's office when they come down and we look at them and make minor adjustments. They're correct. That sheet, as mentioned to you this weekend, that I don't understand why that has been repeated down at the bottom. I, of course, did not prepare that document, and that was not caught during the review of the budget. That should not have been. But to answer your question, the 619 was not doubled in the other expense allocation or the staffing allocation. The numbers that were used in the staffing allocation were the correct projected FTE numbers.
Would you direct me to the number that's used in the staffing allocation so I could follow that? Because tell me which number should I use?
I don't have it with me, but I sent you the staffing allocations that had the total summarized. But that won't equal the projection numbers either, because there's things that are done to those numbers. The ESE is subtracted out of the formula because we don't double staff ESE in the basic, and it's staffed separately. But the numbers, the $30,000 number unweighted FTE you mentioned, that's on Calc 2, but that includes scholarships. And the state backs that revenue out. It's in the revenue calculation. Then they back out the money on the calculation for the vouchers, so it's not in our budget. There's $30 million they subtracted on Calc 2 out of the calculation, which is the voucher piece.
So, Mr. Burkett, I have the staffing thing. I printed it that you gave us, and I just want to make sure I'm following you, because I'm trying to understand this and make sure that I'm, wrap my head around. I see on the district summary total, it says $25,255 at the top.
Staffing, for basic staffing, yes, ma'am. That's for, no, it's not, that excludes.
Okay,
ESE.
so then I took this report that Mr. Andrews sent to me, and I took from the projection column, I added up electric, middle, and high, and the centers, and I got 25,803. That was projected. And then this projection, if I'm looking at it correctly, is 25,205.
Okay, I mean, it's.
So this is less than what's on this projection. The two numbers don't tie us. I guess that's what's really.
I don't know which one you're looking at now. That.
This is what you emailed me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking these numbers here. This projected here, electric came from, elementary 11,830. 6,194.
Yes, to the High Springs, correct.
And then I took the center. So I'm not really sure.
Well, we're close, right? We're 25. How much are we off? 25.
This is 255. And then the back page I just added.
25. So we're 30 off. I mean, we need
That's
to go.
800, 803. That's 600.
Oh, 25.
See?
Oh, 25.
25, 255, and 25,803.
I'm going to have to go back and look and go back through each individual one, total it.
So to my colleagues and to the public that may be watching, I got this info. I've been kind of pouring through this, and I got it over the holiday weekend, so you can't come, I mean, I emailed my questions before then, but, so I don't know which number is used to drive revenue, and Mr. Burkett said earlier, which is what I understand and I agree with, that the budget is driven on enrollment, but to me, there's that 600 student difference. And I'm just trying to figure out which number is used in the projections. That's all, I mean, to bring us a budget number. And if we built our budget based on a number that's inflated enrollment, that means the revenue's overstated. And this is what happened a couple years ago when the FTE was overprojected, and we ended up with a huge.
We'll just have to go back through each individual school and compare it to what's on that list and figure out what the difference is. But I know our budget was based on our projected FTE.
Because students are still coming in right now. We had, I know at one school, you had a projection of 560 students, but unfortunately, parents are still enrolling children 10 days after school has started. And so you're up 100 and some kids. They started with 466 at this particular school, and now they're up. And so I think all we can do is make the best projection possible, estimation possible to make sure, because I understand that part, Ms. McGraw, but when the budget is built, there's some FTE projections that have to go in, and I'm going to ask for Ms. Ford and Mr. Burkett to correct me, that are made initially, and that is what we have to build our budget on. And there's some adjustment that could be made afterwards, but if we project too high, we kind of have to eat the.
What I'm saying is, though, the numbers that the state gave us in our calculation is what our revenue is based on. You can track from the calculation to our budget the state dollars. So we haven't exceeded our projected revenue because we used the calculation from Tallahassee. Now, if there's some differences in the numbers between all the schools, between the two reports, we can resolve that. But I know our revenue and our budget is based on what we receive from the state and what our local tax revenues generate. I mean, that's.
So you say you know that the revenue is based upon the projections that were sent to the state. What number is that? That's what I'm trying to find out.
I'll have to go back and look. It would be the weighted number, like I say, on the calculation. You have to go in there and subtract the vouchers from that calculation, which we can do.
So you can't tell me what that number is now?
Not off the top of my head, no, ma'am. I'll have to go back.
Do you have it in your work papers there? No, so I get, like, for me, when I spent a whole lot of time on this, and the reason why I spent a whole lot of time on it, like trying to go through and tie it out, because I just hate getting to another point in the future in the fiscal year and us we having a scenario like we had last year.
Yeah. Meaning
that the financial condition ratio is lower than what we anticipated, what was projected. And, and that was really, it's based upon the revenue that we project based on the student enrollment. And if that enrollment is not, if it's lower or higher, I mean, if it's higher, actual enrollment is higher than the projection, that's good. But if the projection is, if we projected too many students, which we have done in the past couple years, that means that the budget is, we have an inflated budget, revenue-wise.
We don't make the projections the state uses. They calculate our unweighted FTE based on a formula year to year. That number came in at X, and we're 200 students currently over that projected number. So we've got 200 more FTE than what the state told us on our unweighted FTE.
So what you're telling me is something different from what I've been told in the past by the previous, whatchamacallit, Mr., what's his name, Mr. Judge? No. Is it Judah? Judah, I'm sorry. I'm just going to share the concerns that I have, and I think all of us as electeds, we all ran and had the desire to improve student outcomes, and it takes money to do that. And right now, the financial condition of our organization, I do think is we're kind of in jeopardy. Mr. Burkett, would you all pass that down to him? I think it's it's a couple too many down there, if you all would pass me one back. Mr. Judah, would you bring up the presentation for me? Thank you.
And Madam Chair, if I may, before you get started on the email that was referenced on August 31st, so I got those numbers from Mrs. Neal, and those were the current enrollment as of the 31st, and what she shared with us was showing, based on the numbers she had, that our current enrollment as of August 31st was 26,472 students, which the staffing projection that she was working off of was the 26,095. If we also look, I think on that email that she shared, there was a slide that shows the schools, and it's important to note on that one that, we don't have the number of vouchers yet, but if you took out the vouchers, it still showed us with an enrollment number that was above what was shared there. And also, I think with the financial condition, if we look at what Mr. Burkett shared with us, it showed at the end of this past fiscal year, June 30th of 2023, that the assigned and unassigned fund balance was 9.17%, which is above the 5% where I had to bring a plan. And then as of the projected for June 30th, 2024, as Mr. Burkett shared, was 8.4%, which is also above that 5% policy threshold and above the 3% state threshold.
So, Ms. Andrew, you said the 26,980, how much?
Yes, ma'am. That was 26,000. I've got it right here at the bottom of this page. The current enrollment on August 31st was 26,472.
And the projected amount that was sent to DOE from Ms. Neal is what?
Now, this is the one she shared with me. I don't know if it was the one that went up to the state. It was 26,095. When
095, it's 26,095?
Yes, ma'am.
So I guess like for me, when we get multiple documents from staff and none of them, the numbers are consistent between the documents, that is a cause for concern for me. And it's a cause for concern because if they don't tie, so how am I to know what the number is? He couldn't tell me what the number was sent to the state, and so Mr. Andrews not sure if that is what was sent. Maybe he is, I'm not sure. But at any rate, when I walked through the numbers here, I had concerns about the accuracy and the completeness of the information that we received. We didn't receive all of this when we got the tentative budget. This is what we received. And to be able to go through this, to be able to see how we're actually spending our funds, we really need to be able to look at that, because we're in a climate now with our particular budget where we're going to have to make some choices about how we're spending our money, and program evaluation, reduction of expenses, and all of that. That is something we're going to have to look at seriously, and we have not looked at that in this current budget year. Mr. Judge, I'm ready. I'll go ahead and share what I kind of put together, just to, maybe pictorially I'll be able to, and just for us to be able to kind of get on one accord with how we're going to operate as a board and how we're going to operate as a district financially, because we're not as in good a shape as we say we are, because that transfer out of the 1.5 capital mills is something that the auditors have told us about, and it's allowable, but it is not the way that we're going to, it's not sustainable. It is not sustainable. So you could go ahead and put the slides back up, and I just kind of maybe, in my questions, they may not be warranted, but the information that we received, did you get one of these, Mr. Burkett? Did you get one? Okay. And I think all of us, we want the same thing. I'm not questioning you guys, what you guys want or whatever, because I think we all want for our students to come out of our public education system having received improved outcomes. That's why all of us ran, and so that what I'm saying, we can reach our goals of excellent, equitable outcomes for all students if we provide appropriate supports and resources to our schools and teachers. And unfortunately, I know we're like kind of tired of talking about this, some may say, but it's important. And so I went back and just kind of grabbed some info from, was in my master board when I first came on the board, outlining what our roles are as a board member and what the roles of the superintendent are. And just quickly, you know, ours is we adopt the vision and goals and policies and evaluate outcomes, and on the superintendent side, that he or she is to develop plans and regulations and implement those and evaluate the progress. But we all, you know, our governance role has to kind of work in coordination with the management role for us to make sure that we're getting where we'd like to be. And our duties, the duties of the board members are prescribed in our board policy as well as state law. We're to work collaboratively with our superintendent, whoever it is, to, you know, on matters to make sure that, as it says there, the superintendent is going to advise us, the board, on educational matters, make recommendations, and we're supposed to, you know, approve those things, and not necessarily what he does, because there could be some coming and goings or some giving and taking in that, you know. But policy outlines what our things is, and what the board policy says is we're to review educational resources, and that's what I'm trying to do, to go through this, and that's just kind of, I've had questions about our budget as a citizen, and I continue to have those questions about our budget as an elected official. But this is, you know, the board policy is to facilitate academic standards and budget priorities and budget mandates, and that is, I'll pull that out of there. And there's another one, we're to have community relations and doing, you know, involving the public, parents, general public, and all stakeholders in our planning, and regularly communicating information about, you know, policies and programs and fiscal conditions. And accountability is also one of our things. The relationship, as I said earlier, with our superintendent is, the superintendent is to make those recommendations to us, but he's to work with the staff, cause it to get done. I'm not saying he has to do everything. Whoever the superintendent is has to do everything, but the staff has to do that, and to make recommendations that can be supported to the board. And for me, because these enrollment numbers and all the documents that we've been given, none of them are matching up, or some of them are, but I'm saying the totals there are discrepancies in them, and when I ask questions, I'm not clear on it. You all may be. What the statute says, you know, the statute tells us, in our policies, our board policies that we get from Neola, recommendations from our staff attorney as well as the board attorney. But here we have a responsibility of ensuring that there are adequate resources to maintain facilities, 180 days. We have to fund 180 days of school. And, you know, one of the biggest things that we have to do after hiring a superintendent is adopting a budget. And this is $604 million is what they projected this to be. And, you know, individual school board members, it says that we can request and we should receive the proposed tentative and official budget documents, as well as supporting things. So I've only asked for what the state statute says we can. And if this information isn't correct, and we, you know, like I said, the financial condition ratio, I've been telling everybody that if that goes below 3%, which is what's in statute, or we knowingly operate in a manner that we know is that, and things are not done properly, you know, that's cause for suspension or removal. So, and here are the responsibilities of the superintendent. I won't go through those. But what I do want to get through to us is we have a responsibility for fiscal transparency. It's outlined in state statute as to what information we should be providing, and it should be easily understandable. It should tie. It shouldn't be a bunch of smoke and mirrors. And sometimes that's how I felt, is that the information has not been clear and complete, so that it's easily understandable by the average citizen as to what we have. And there should be budget transparency, and this is straight out of the statute, which leads to more responsible spending, more citizen involvement, and improved accountability. So that's what statute says, and we have a policy 1030 that goes along with that. I shared with you all a few months ago a couple of FAD studies that have been done. And FADS is the Florida Association of District Superintendents, and they'll come in and, at the request of the superintendent, and do a couple of studies, or one can be in finance, one can be in human resources or human capital. And this is from December 2014. And it says, district expenditures for the last 3 years have and currently are exceeding revenues, resulting in a projected $2.6 million deficit. This was in 2014. The fund balance is in decline. It says, although this is 2014, although there's evidence that the district has developed a strategic plan, it doesn't appear that it's functioning. We're kind of in a spot where we're working on developing a plan. Although board members appear to have individual goals for the district, there does not appear to be a shared vision, which includes district direction and priorities. There's a perception among board members that financial data presented to them is not reliable. There also appears to be division between the east and west areas in terms of free and reduced lunch population. With the new superintendent, a new board member, and recent senior level staff changes, formal and informal communication processes appear to be lacking. And many schools within the district are underutilized, which is a drain on resources. And most of these 2014 issues still exist today. Our auditors, the external auditors come in, Purvis and Gray as our current auditors, and this is what they said. This is at the end of fiscal year 21. And I'm really just trying to tell the story because, as you said, my colleague McGraw earlier, that these are things that were done before we got here, but these are problems we have to solve. And so in 21, the general fund expenditures exceeded revenues by $8.3 million. Maybe compared to the previous year, which general fund expenditures exceeded revenues by $9.3 million. All right. In 22, external auditors said the same thing, $17.1 million, maybe compared to the previous year of $8.3 million, 2020, 2021. Fiscal, it says that 2021-22, a significant decline in enrollment resulted in a decrease in FEFP. So we all know enrollment is indeed related to that. And again here, the transfers between capital projects are $1.5 million over into the general fund. Is $11 million to cover maintenance expenditures, as well as $1 million from ESSER was transferred in the general fund, and those are not counted as revenue, which that's why I was trying to get a clarification from Mr. Burkett. The auditor generals come in and they've audited us, and this was in the report they emailed to the board, and that in red there it says $117,000 to $490,326 of which and a total expenditures of $551,000 the board didn't amend the budget for. So we have some control issues, and they recommend, they have a recommendation that I didn't copy on there because I was trying to make it. And the effect of that means that the district, it says, changing financial circumstances of the district's ability to meet current financial obligations could be hindered. Our staff has told us in 2021 that we have decline in enrollment. In the budget workshop in 21, that was May of 22, for this current fiscal year that just ended, we had several financial challenges. We had a budget deficit from our general fund revenue with expenditures of $5.5 million, and those are some of the solutions that were proposed. And the last one on there was what was used. And we used $1.5 million, and we used ESSER, as well as putting expenditures on $1 million. This decline in financial condition is also impacting our bond rating and our commercial paper. And from Moody's, we were told that last year by staff as well, and it's caused a decline in the grading of the debt that we have. If we were to go out to market to issue new debt, it would likely cost us more money. So for the certificates of participation that we already have outstanding, they're not impacted by this, but the downgrade would if we had to go back out to market to borrow money for any reason. And right now, we're hoping we don't have to do that because the plan was to use sales tax revenue in the $1.5 million to do the project list, but because of rising construction costs, and the inflation there, as well as if we're using more of the $1.5 million money to balance our general fund budget, that leaves less money to do capital. So we may indeed have to go out and borrow money, hopefully not, but that's the impact on that. And the financial condition ratio, as you all have seen this, I think we shared this with you all when you first came on the board. And last November, I saw this and we did a plan to recover that. And the actions that have been taken so far have been to move funds from ARP, I think it was $4.5 million from ARP to cover that deficit, as well as moving allowable expenses per the ballot language to the 1 mil. But in doing that, we've also meaning that there are some technology expenses now that cannot be taken, and the 1 mil is fully allocated. So this challenge of overspending or spending more from general fund, this is just a summary here that I went back through all the records that I had. And you can see in 2020, 21, and all, we have consistently, over the past few years, spent more money. And those asterisks there that I have are, amounts from the financial recovery, and then the 8.2 million is from the tentative budget document that I have. But right here, we have, I think I can't find my sheet where Mr. Burkett just gave us, if that 8.2, but the 8.2 million that I have coming from there now, that came from a previous document that I was given. The staffing, this file here I built from sheets that we get a staffing report, sometimes quarterly, or whenever they do budget amendments, the board will receive these as well as with the budget ones. And I just built this. I went back to since I've been on the board and built this. And we can see that our enrollment has been declining, and we can see that our staffing has not had that same decline. So we still have challenges that have been presented to us, and in this budget right here, we have not addressed any of these challenges in this budget. We have the continued impact of universal vouchers. That was a little bit unknown when we were doing the budget meetings. We had a lot of things that were presented to us from December up until April during the budget committee meetings, as well as in May 31st. We had the competitive school of excellence that's been approved. Potential new charters, the charter up in I said the Waldorf has about 86 kids, I think. The impact of state legislation on funding, we have revenue funding, so the sharing that we have to do with charters, and when the other things come about, the 1 mil and the 1.5 mil money has to be shared with them. They don't just get the FEFP money. We got upcoming the 1 mil approval, or hopefully, reapproval in 2024. And the 1 mil fund balance now, it is below the 3%, I think, and it was said that he recommended it be higher than that, 10%. The technology refresh, because we have moved all of those expenses for school counselors, media, and the Magnus, moved 100% of those salaries over to the mill. There's no money in the mill now to do the technology refresh, and all of the assessments at the high school level and all are done on computers. So that is something we have to figure out a way, and staff and recruitment and retention. The other challenges that were not on that slide, rising health care and retirement costs, transportation costs that exceed reimbursement amounts significantly. And I know Ms. Eunice and Dr. Roll are going to be getting with us with some plans for some of that. We have also rising costs of utilities and goods and services, rising costs of construction and maintenance of facilities. And as I ask you guys, the board, we need to agree upon priorities until our strategic plan is completed. The fiscal cliff with the end of ESSER in 24 and ARP. And as I said earlier, my questions, the FTE projection discrepancy, I thought the numbers that we got in here would be what was the budget was, but those numbers are not flowing through. And there were missing positions not allocated in the report approved 2023. The departmental staffing had some challenges in it. I'm going to say errors, I don't know, but they sent me a new one of those on Sunday, late Sunday, and I'm not sure. I didn't get a chance to go back and look through it because it was late Sunday and Monday. And I think the reports and supporting documents that we're getting should be timely, but they've got to be accurate and complete. And I'm not sure if you guys looked in the packet that we received, but like the 1 mil budget, if you looked at it by school, there were a couple things that were in there, and I pointed them out, and they hadn't been corrected in here. Like the one thing was there's no Genesis Preparatory School, and they had an allocation in there. There was no budget for the band director for Fort Clark. And these all seem like small types of things, but if there are errors and inconsistencies in financial documents, if I was an auditor, that expands my scope and my search and my looking for things, because the information, I now can't depend on the accuracy and the validity without testing and doing more. And I just, like I said, for me, we've had a lot of these challenges, and I don't think they've been addressed, and they're not new challenges. These are challenges that have been outlined for us for a couple of years. So in order to reach our goals, excellent equitable outcomes for all of them, this is what I propose. I think we have to facilitate budget priorities and budget mandates. I think we got to involve our stakeholders in district planning. We got to communicate better about our policy and programs and fiscal conditions, and things are not well with us. It's not the house, I'm not saying, we got the house burning down with student achievement, but our house is very unstable, financially. There are things we can do to keep it up, but this is unsustainable. And as the chair, I'm really floating the idea of creating a ad hoc citizens committee to help with some analysis and to bring a recommendation back to us for that, to help us to sort of prepare. We can't go into another budget season and be inactive and just wait and see what's going to happen. We have to be proactive now and start planning for how we're going to maneuver and position ourselves as a district for the end of ESSER, but also for all of those other challenges that we have. We have to start doing that. And the Technology Governance Committee, as both of these things are already in policy, I think we have got to have, we're supposed to get a written plan every year, but we can get that. But we've got to start looking at how we're going to do our technology refresh, because there were a lot of computers purchased at the start of COVID. That I think it was in 2020, fiscal year 2020, 2021. We've spent some ESSER funds on some technology, but right now the normal refresh that has been taking place over the years through 1 mil, that is not in the budget this year. I think for us as a board, these are some things I think we need to consider doing. We have to direct the superintendent and staff to prepare a report for the half-cent sales tax oversight committee. There's some reporting that they do every month, but we have got to upgrade that long-term capital plan. And it has to be more than just 1 year. It's, by law, it's supposed to be 5. That original list has to be looked at. Progress, and we need to communicate to the public a little bit more robustly the progress that we've made on the towards completion of each project on the original list. Budgeted what we thought things would cost and what they've actually cost. Every project, I think, has come in the last year or so more than what those original projections were. And process and timeline for reviewing and revising the project list, we've got to come up with some kind of recommendation for that. And direct the superintendent to work with the internal auditors. We have an internal auditor, and this is really key, because when we had that tentative budget meeting, I felt like some innuendo or some things thrown out there, like our previous CFO had done some things that were improper, but when I asked Mr. Burkett and I asked Mr. Andrew, they didn't know what I was talking about. Nobody could give anything, but having the internal audit, that is one of their jobs. To do is to make sure that our internal controls are sufficient to detect fraud or impropriety. We have board policies, we have state law, but that's one of the jobs of having an on-staff internal auditor. And then we have the external auditors, but they come and they don't do a full internal controls audit. They're looking and reviewing our financial records. So that's what I have there. I see some lights. I have lots of questions still. Mr. Burkett told us when we did the tentative budget that before we approved the final budget, September 11th, next week, that things could be changed, but I haven't, I don't know, we haven't gotten any information on anything that would be modified or in this budget to sort of situate us and address those concerns. ESSER is going to make the landing and make this year here go fine, I think, but we haven't even received an ESSER budget as to what we would have. Like some of these, I could go through all of these tabs in here with the things I just had questions upon of, in the school-based budgets, there was nothing that for the federal things. And then when I looked in the federal budget, they didn't have any other than Title I. There's no other allocation to any of the schools for how we were spending the remaining ARP and ESSER dollars. So, I mean, it's a lot that we have going on here, and I don't think we've been given a complete set of reports to kind of walk us through what our priorities are going to be for this year, other than just opening the doors for the next 180 days. So, Dr. Rockwell, I see your light.
So I also noticed the inclusion of Genesis Preparatory School that is no longer operating, but I did not see Constellation Charter School, the new one.
Yes, ma'am. You are correct. That was a placeholder. When the budget was built, that money was put because that center was established with all the required fields to enter that charter school money, and that was meant to be updated. It will be updated, but that is Constellation, yes, ma'am.
And if we're updating school names, this is just an FYI, I noticed that Archer Elementary is still Archer Community School in the facility naming.
Okay.
And I don't know if that can or should be updated, since in everywhere else it's Archer Elementary now. But then I guess when I was looking through the departmental budget summary reports, I saw kind of a lot of places where there were big changes from last year's budget to this year's budget. Some of them, I'm assuming, are like categoricals rolling in.
Exactly.
Because you have instructional positions that used to be paid for.
Those categoricals will roll forward. That will
Okay, but in some places, I saw large decreases that I couldn't figure out, like, what we had cut. So for instance, on page 15 of that report, it's not a super large decrease from last year's budget, but it's a big decrease from last year's actual expenditure in our administrative technology services. We spent over $2 million last year, and we budgeted even less this year than we did last year. And I guess when I see things like that where the budgeted items have dropped, and that happens a couple of times on the following page, page 16, I guess what concerns me is when I see, okay, we spent this much last year and we've budgeted even less for it this year. How are we going to make that happen? Like in a lot of these categories, we overspent the budgeted amount for the 22-23 school year. And now we're saying we're still going to spend less in 23-24. And I guess I'm worried that, yes, the budget is balanced, but what happens in these areas where we overspent last year, chances are we're going to overspend again. How are we not going to end up with a massive overage again?
Well, part of what you're talking about could be attributed to the fact that those numbers do not have encumbrances rolled forward yet. So if there's outstanding purchases that were made the year before, those have not been added to the budget yet, so that will be added. Or if it's a categorical or grant or internal grant of some sort, that balance would be added at some point. I don't know which particular one you're looking at. I'd be glad to check it, but encumbrances are not. They're rolled for. They've been rolled now, but normally they're not rolled. Actually, in the past until October, but the roll was done after those reports were produced. That roll was just done this week.
So you said the encumbrances are rolled forward in October, so the beginning budget number for 23-24, you're saying isn't updated for the encumbrances. Is that why you're saying there's a discrepancy there?
They will now. They will when you get the final numbers on the 11th when we do the compare. The encumbrances have been rolled into the budget. In the past, they haven't been. They've been rolled in October. And that was one of the reasons for doing a lot of the roll early, was to get those things budgeted. So when we rerun all these reports again after, or right at 9/11, when it's finalized, the numbers will look a little different. And there's still money in contingency that has to be rolled forward, but there's a lot that's already been rolled forward.
And okay, well. You got any other questions I had on? I was going to ask you, I asked Mr. Shelnut earlier, is there a report that shows the departmental staffing and the school staffing as one, so that we could see how that table is, that has instructional, ESP, admin, and all federal and general fund as a funding source? Is there a report that combines both of those data points in one?
I believe so. Well, total funding, federal and operating.
You say it again. What's the name of? Did you give us that?
I think we handed out something this afternoon that had that new staffing numbers on it that Ms. Hankins produced for us.
What's the name? Would you repeat the name of it? I didn't hear you. Total funding?
It was a summary of the federal and operating staff on a sheet. I think we gave it to you and the information we gave you this afternoon.
Oh.
My intent was to have it, now whether or not it got in there.
Capital. I see 2023, 2024 capital projects. I see that one, and I saw the two sheets that had the.
I have not forwarded that information to y'all. I have to edit it, and then I need to send it to you. I got it this morning. I have not edited it yet.
All right. I was wondering if I hadn't seen it. That's why I was like, wait, I went through this thing here. I hadn't seen it. Okay. Well, as I said in my slides, I feel even less confident in voting for this budget than I have in previous times. I think it's all cobbled together, but that's my opinion of it all. I think it's cobbled together.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a few comments.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Girl.
First of all, thank you for this. This would have been nice to have prior to the meeting, and probably this would have been a good tool for orientation when we first came in, because I know when I first came on the board, one of the things I said was my idea. It was kind of here and everywhere. This would have been a great tool for orientation. Also, I want to say to Mr. Burkett, who I've had 3 meetings with, thank you for the hard work. What I would like to say is that we're in a new school year, and part of the problem I see with the district after, of course, being involved for so many years, cross-training. People, there needs to be more cross-training. People need to be trained so that they know each other's job. When you have one person trying to do it all, and that's been a problem in this district, we have to have systems and processes in place to ensure. What I will say in my meeting with staff, because it's not a matter of, don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but here we are at 23 school year, and, 24 school year. And one of the things I see after meeting with our chief of finance, there were some calculations that were not correct in the past. Also, we had $86 million come in for ESSA funds, things that we could have corrected and helped in our district. There was no oversight or guidance on that. And so now that since June 30th, some people have left, there are changes that are being made. We have to allow those changes to work. The superintendent, I meet with him twice a month, and with the superintendent, so I can understand all of these processes, because in here, when you indicated, we all have responsibility, and one of the reasons I ran was about transparency. And so also, I want to speak to my constituencies and people to understand that we are being fiscally responsible according to what I have received. And I want to make sure they know that, because we can't do anything about the past, because the problems that we've had financially continuously in this district have gone on well before any of us have served on this board. It's been going on quite some time. However, I thank goodness for the wisdom, Mr. Burkett returning to help us. Because when you look at our total funds and you have to take out capital outlay, because that's not income, I think that may have been calculated in before, but we can't do anything about the past. All we can do is move forward. Our reserves, Mr. Burkett, I know we're above 3% for our reserve. Is that correct? And so that was one of my main concerns. But also how we're giving out, like you talked about the achievement gap, how we're giving out allocations and things now. That's being monitored better. The problem is a lot of this stuff has not been monitored. And so now here we are, another school year, with Mr. Andrew now having the team that he's been able to make some changes to ensure that can happen. We have to allow those processes and things to work. And part of that is we can't continue to also be so pessimistic that it affects employees who are working. You have people who are in our finance department. They may have had experience in banking, but they're not accountants. And like you said, Marion County has 5. We don't have all of that, because we always talk about how we don't have enough people to do things. But what we do have now, the superintendent has the opportunity to bring somebody in to help make sure those processes and things are in place. But if I'm always looking for something, if I'm always thinking there is, and I get what you're saying, we all have to be fiscally responsible, but we also now, we got to give them a chance to work together and get training that they need to make sure that happens, because we all are responsible for accountability, all of us. But one of the things I see, and that's one of the reasons I tried to go around, build up people, because people have been working in fear. I can speak about knowing in this district for so long. They have been working in fear till there are some great suggestions to make things better. But we have to have people feel that they can speak freely and be able to share so that everything gets better. But I don't want the community to think that we're hanging on by a nail and thread. Yes, we have some challenges. But we have wisdom. I believe in the seat with Mr. Burkett now. He may not know skyward, but he knows numbers. And so after meeting with him and looking at how things were calculated, I totally understand the reserve, because we can't use ESSA funds or temporary money to help with our reserves. But I do think now that we're here, we have to give it a chance. I know enrollments, like I would say, I was visiting a school, and here you have 100 and some. We have families who are enrolling kids 10 or 12 days after school has started. And so at this point, I have to say to Mr. Burkett, because I'm not going back to the past. I want people to feel comfortable, get the training that they need, so that then once you have the training, once people understand their roles, but when you have one person that comes in and they're doing everything and you're not training your staff, this is why these questions people have come. But I also want to let the community know that we are working on this. This is June 30th, people were out. July 1st to now, the superintendent has had an opportunity to hire and bring other people in so that we can begin to see processes and systems change. But I do not want the community to think that all of us are not sitting up here concerned about being fiscally responsible, because we all are. Because this year, I believe this is a year of progress. But if we don't allow people to work, gather their mind with the changes that are coming, and not be so negative all the time or pessimistic, and we have to believe that changes are going to come, because that's how you get better, productive employees. And that process, that needs to happen. And so, Mr. Burkett, with that, I want to thank you for what you are doing. You come back to help us. I don't want you to walk out the door. So I want to thank you for what you are doing. And Ms. Ford, thank you, because I know you all are learning. I know the superintendent is meeting and trying to bring some training in so that we're all on one accord when it comes to the budget. Thank you, Madam Chair. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Ms. McGraw, for that, for your comments. Dr. Rockwell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In looking over your recommendations for actions, I concur with most of these recommendations, and I think that kind of a common theme through these is that we need to involve our citizens, our community more than we currently have been. You know, forming the first recommendation of an ad hoc citizen advisory committee to develop a plan to transition out of the ESSER and ARPA funding. That's good, but we also need to make sure we're getting community input on ESSER itself. That's a requirement of the grant that we have not been meeting completely, and we need to do that. Again, you know, updating the comprehensive technology plan and the long-term capital budget plan and the half-cent projects list. We have a half-cent advisory committee that provides oversight. They might be able to help with that, because the reality is that what we projected costs to be was way under what costs have actually been, because unfortunately construction costs have gone up a lot. We could not have predicted that. The previous board could not have predicted that. It's just a reality that now we have to adapt to, and so I think that's also a great recommendation. But mainly, you know, when this packet, which I concur with my colleague, Mrs. McGraw, that this would have been great, some of these snippets of policy to have highlighted during onboarding, which was a brand new thing that Chair Surden did. So she was doing it for the first time, and now she has feedback for when we get other new board members of things that they would have liked to have. But, you know, realizing that part of the board's responsibility is advocating for and obtaining that community input, that we, again, we're required to have that for ESSER, we're required to have that for half-cent. And so we have some standing committees that we can pull together and, you know, get some of these things updated. I don't think these recommended actions are, you know, a criticism of our current staff. They're ways to move forward with more transparency and more community input so that we make sure that we're doing the best thing for children. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Dr. Rockwell. So a couple things. I'm not like pessimistic, and I actually pulled this together because I feel like I've been saying a lot of this stuff, like a meeting here, a meeting there, and just to kind of compile it all in one spot is what I decided to do. But I can give anybody like the benefit of the doubt, but I think not acting and being slow to act it will be to our detriment. And some of the things that were pointed out here, I understand the changes, you know, colleague McGraw, what you said about there being changes made in the current fiscal year, but when we had budget committee meetings, and probably I think going forward into the next year, it probably should not just be just one board member, the chair. I think it should be the whole board, so that I think everybody can hear, because we had meetings starting in December and these things were highlighted as to our challenges, and there's been no action. And this is the second year we've been made known and told about these challenges. And so we kind of like have to like start like acting upon this stuff on the knowledge that we get and the information we get from staff and just the reality. I mean, when we see how the current climate in education is, we can't like wait and say, oh, I'm gonna put this person on my team and they're gonna do what I want them to do because I selected them. We have to direct the staff that's here, because everybody that's here, we just kind of gotta, and come to the board members that are here. I mean, I have been like just saying, look, we need to do this. And when we sat in those budget meetings, there would be a suggestion from the leadership, because there was a principal at each level. And there was suggestion or whatever thrown out from staff. But what I have seen incorporated were expansions in staffing, like the deans. They said they needed more supports for behavior. I'm not against that, but what I did say, and Superintendent Andrew and Dr. Edwards, all of them can tell you, I did say that I agree, I can agree with you on that, but if we're going to do that, what are we going to give up or pull back so that we can afford to do that? And that is kind of like the balance that we're going to have to, that we struggle with. There are a lot of things that are good and we want to do, but if we're spending money in ways, we really have to like start to look at things and take heed. Like it was suggested that we may have to start, doing some changes with our health insurance because of this, how that cost is escalating. We have to act on that. We can't like just keep waiting and not doing anything, because decisions are going to have to be made. It's the same with the things that we're dealing with, having to rezone. Previous boards didn't do it, and so now we're here and we have to do this because we have those schools that are so enrollment and certain schools is so out of balance, and then we have under enrollment at other schools, but it's been kicked down the road. It's not an indictment on, and I'm not blaming staff. It's just this is where our reality is, and we have got to do something to change this. And I was really hoping that we would get more movement on doing something to try to say we have a strategy for going that way. Dr. McNeely, I see your light. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's been a long day already, and we still have much more action to take tonight. I can agree with colleague Rockwell that there are some things that you presented that I would be in agreement with. I certainly am not in agreement with number 4 under recommended board actions for a reason, and we'll talk about that later. But I'd like to hear from Mr. Burkett from if we are okay, because I'm not going to be here Monday. So I guess I'm asking, you will be taking the final vote on Monday, and I want to know before I leave town whether or not we are in good condition financially, condition ratio where we are always afraid not to fall a certain percentage below so that the state won't have to come in and take control. Are we or are we not? And I think you've said yes, but I want to hear it one more time.
Based on the estimated figures that I provided today, yes, ma'am, we are.
Okay, so inasmuch that the chair has said that at this point there are some things still lacking, are you going to be asking Madam Chair or Mr. Burkett and Ms. Ford to come back before the 11th with these things? What are we sitting here saying?
I'm not going to ask them to come back with anything. They've come and they're going to bring the final budget and we'll vote on it. The 4 of us, you'll be out and we'll move forward.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I heard Mr. Burkett say that we're fine. I'm going to believe that. I'm going to take a look back through this packet that the chair has pulled together for us. I do want to, as you were going through some of the things, Chair Certain, especially with the finance study and way back in 2014, I want you to realize how many superintendents ago that we had. No, I'm just saying, I want the public to understand because they can't see what we have. But I know for a fact all of the people that I sat up here with on the dais is not the person to my right now. And we are not trying to throw any of the former 7 superintendents that I've been under the bus, but I want the public to understand, as you stated, Chairman Certain, this did not just start. These are some overlying things that have been going on. I'm glad you're pointing them out, but I would request that our staff have the time We cannot continue to put more and more requests on them. And I know we had a talk earlier today that I cannot bring up about what you're doing or what you should be doing on the clock, but I do know that we have folk who are really, really trying to get all of this correct. Now that you have presented this, Chairman Surton, I think that staff will go back and take a look at everything that you have pointed out here so that these things will not be brought up when we have the audits, the Moody recommendations. All of these things need to be internalized and thought through and talked about. This is great what you presented today, but I'm just wondering, when will folk have the time to go back now and try to get all of these things straight that you have pointed out? I appreciate you, because if you did not present in this manner, then folk would be saying, maybe they would be saying, we didn't know, or we didn't have an understanding. It's in writing now. And so we'll go back, take a look at that, the group of us here as well as our staff. But I do appreciate you with pulling this together. You didn't have much of a Labor Day vacation. Thank you for doing that. Thank you, Mr. Burkett, for all that you have done. Thank you to the superintendent today on his birthday for listening and wanting to even meet with us. So thanks to all of you. Thank you, Ms. Abbott, for our treats. I'm enjoying mine. And thank you to the rest of the staff.
So, Dr. McNeely, I actually didn't ask staff for anything other than when I was going through the reports, because I am cognizant of the workload. I know it's year end and they've got the audit. I was just going through what they gave us. And honestly, what we do as an organization, not honestly, but in actuality, if you look at the budget information that we get as a school district and we compare that to what comes from the city and from the county, it's nowhere near, we don't even scratch the subject. We don't even scratch the topic, the surface level of what they get, the number of hearings that they have and meetings that they have and going through their budget and developing a budget. So I'm not trying to equate us to them, but I think it is important that the board members receive reports that are accurate and complete and are timely so that we can look at things and we can make a decision. You've heard me say for years, I don't understand how we have a special assessment, meaning the mill, and a lot of districts don't have that, and we were always, even before I sat in this seat up here, crying that we don't have money to do certain things. And that is because I think we let, it's kind of like in your personal budget, when you spend money on a lot of different discretionary things, and you don't keep track of what you're spending it on and evaluate if that's really what you want to accomplish, and then you get to the end of the month or the end of the year, and you look and you said, oh, I haven't done this and I haven't done that, and you can't really say you didn't have the money. You had the money, you just may have spent it going out to eat, to the movies, and this, that, and the other, when you didn't direct it to do the things that you wanted to get done. And that is really what I am just really imperiling. I'm not blaming the superintendent there.
Right.
This is his second budget year, though. This is the second budget year. So that we do have to say, and some of this information he did know that was there. So that we do have to, that I do say I attribute to him, because he didn't just get there. Some of this information he did know because he came in a year, and that was all shared with even us, you and I. Our colleagues weren't here, but all of us, we were aware of this information because it came forward to us. And so I think that I'm just trying to share with you all the concern that I have, and that the pace that we're on is unsustainable. It is not sustainable long term. And we look, and I go around and I say, why can't we have nice things? The reason we can't have nice things and we can't do some of the things that we like to do is because we don't really have control of our finances. We don't have control of them. We don't. We would like to have, Ms. Abbott has suggested several times, having year-round school with an extended day. That costs money. We don't have it in our budget, and that would benefit some of our students from having additional instruction time. We don't have the money to do that. Member McGraw wants to expand CTE offerings. to different schools. That's an excellent idea, but we don't have the funding to do that. We have a dedicated funding source that voters have approved, but there's no room in that budget to do anything like that now.
And we do.
Magnet and CTE, one meal can pay for that. But we've got to retool this, but now that we put 100% of school counselors, and we put 100% of media specialists on there isn't even any money in there to do classroom technology. That's all I'm saying. We've got to retool this. We cannot like continue to go on and just pull from that slide where I did that trending of where we can see how much money we're pulling from the 1.5 mil and bring it into the general fund to balance the budget. That is what it's doing. I don't know if y'all recall me saying in July when Mr. Burkett was there about balancing the budget. That should not be the plug. That is what the mill is, the 1.5 mil capital mill has been used is as a budget plug. And as long as we do that and we continue along that path, we will not be able to make those types of changes. We want that to improve opportunities and offer more supports for students in different ways. We won't be able to do that. That's all I'm just trying to get. And we're going to have make some actions and some changes at the end of this budget year, 24. When we get ready to come down, there's going to be, a fiscal cliff denotes a crash, and our district is not the only one that's dealing with this. But we have to be proactive.
Madam Chair, we got to start to look at grants and other things. You know, you got to think outside the box. And there are some things that there again, that we have saved money on. That's why I go and ask and I sit down and talk, because we have to look at some of the things on how we're doing things. And so I think we can accomplish some of those things if we focus on what are the programs, what's really benefiting children, what's really working. And then Mr. Rejoui, who has just arrived, excellent source, excellent asset to this district, who can start looking at grants that we can still applying for things to help with programs that benefit our children.
I don't
There are
disagree.
grants out there for gun violence, all types of things, because you're right. We got to start looking at what's best, and there are some great things, and that's why I have asked the staff, please start marketing what you're doing, because if you don't talk about the great things that you're doing, people will have a narrative that we're absolutely sitting here doing nothing. Because people have said that we're not doing anything, and all of us who were elected, they voted for change. And I can say, as a board member, there are things that are changing that are great. And I tell people, are there things we still have to work on? Absolutely. But don't think that we are, and everybody who knows Ms. McGraw, I'm going to try to walk on water. But I'm also going to make sure I'm supporting people. I'm allowing people that chance to get the training that they need. Then you hold people accountable. But I'm also going to be very encouraging, because I do that in my own walk of life. But what I'm saying is we have an opportunity now with this board to make serious change if we focus on, our total focus has to be on what's best for children. Just because we don't agree doesn't mean that we still can't work together. It has to be what is best for children. But as soon as somebody doesn't agree, we don't need to begin to look at, well, that she or he is going to be a problem. It's still what's best for children. Like right now, gun violence is something we need to be working on with all our children. It affects all of us. I'm just giving that as an example. So as we move forward, let's give this administration a chance to work on for the 23-24 school year what's best, but give them a chance to be able to work and make those changes. Thank you again, Madam Chair.
Yeah,
Ms.
and so,
Certain, I didn't finish because we were chatting back and forth. I need to say that I agree with you as far as you were stating how people spend, and get to the end of the month and wonder what happened to the money, because I'm one of those kind of people. But as far as all of us coming together to work on the budget instead of just the chair, I totally agree with you on that. We need to be at the table as well and hearing all of the things that we need to hear, other than just when we come to a meeting like we're at now. So I do appreciate your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Dr. McNeely. And kind of along a real good segue, Ms. Andrew, I see your light. Dr. McNeely, would you turn your light off? I think that kind of goes into what if everyone, I hope we did, bring their two priorities for what we're going to focus on as a district. What are our priorities for this school year? We're into September 5th. And the board has to provide we as a board have to agree on some priorities and what we're going to give to our superintendent for this school year as priorities. I didn't get any of those any priorities from the meeting that we had before we went into the school year, where the chiefs sat around the table and they kind of gave us a synopsis of what they're doing, but I didn't hear any priorities that were specific and that were going to be measurable and how we were going to be looking at our progress throughout this school year. So I'm hoping that you all brought those with you today so we could have that conversation as well. And I'll recognize Mr. Andrew, and then we'll come back to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to remind the public, our priorities are safety, accelerated achievement for all students, and taking care of the whole child. That's student well-being. That's something we're focused on every single day from the time your child gets to school or if they're getting on the bus to when we get them home. We're always going to be focused on taking care of your whole child. So I just want to remind our public of that. And just a couple comments on ESSER and ARP. The previous superintendent did hire a special projects manager to work on that from the onset. When it comes to committees, I want to remind everybody we have a half-cent oversight committee that will be meeting, I want to say September 18th at 4 p.m. So I would ask the public, please come out to that and provide us your input and get updates as we give that to the public on the oversight of the half-cent. We also have a 1 mil oversight committee, and that's been in place since the passage of the 1 mil. And speaking of the 1 mil, I just would like to mention, as far as, what action is the superintendent taken, some of the things mentioned there are tied directly to the 1 mil. They're in the ballot language of the 1 mil. So, for example, spending money on staffing costs for the counselor program, that is in the language of the 1 mil. So is the school library program and spending money on media specialists and staffing there, as well as career and tech ed. That's also a 1 mil ballot language component, so nothing's spent outside of the actual ballot language. And then when it comes to the ARP funds, I know this is repetitive because I've mentioned this before, but at the start of the 21-22 school year, I want to say we were over allocated 40, I think, plus positions. I'll go back and see if I can get an exact number because I know we want exact numbers. And those positions were not pulled back by the leadership at the time, costing the district well over $4 million, hence the $4.5 million transfer out of ARP, which is permitted to take care of COVID costs. As you recall, it was that fall that we had a big spike prior to school starting, and there was decisions made to support students as they came back from COVID. So those were all things that we had to make up, and that when we figured that out, I came in March of that year of 22, when that was figured out in the fall at our orientation, actually, when it was just abruptly blurted out and thrown out there. I know the acting chair at this time was surprised, as I was. It was the first time we'd ever heard we were in such a predicament. And I believe so did the other board. Well, they were not board members at the time. They were board members elect. So that was shared with the board member elects at the time prior to even be shared with the sitting board members, as I recollect. And so those things transpired, and I just wanted to put that out there again, since I'm sure this is also confusing for our public. But I do want to say, too, with the county, with their budget, certainly I've always said, I think there was some quote here from Brene at the end, and I think that goes for all of us. I've owned our failures before and our setbacks, and I would just say, let's all own them, because I think in some of the times presented today on the calendar year, I think some of them stretch back further than what was presented, but nonetheless, I own those because I've been part of the system for 32 plus years, so they're all part of my fabric. At the same time, the county doesn't have 29,000 students to look after, so I'm sure they have more time to work on their budget. Every time that, I don't think we've talked about academics or achievement more than a few seconds today. Again, you know, we want to accelerate learning for all students, and I'll take it back to that because I'm reminded of that from board members that, you know, what are we doing? And so I didn't bring my list with me today, but certainly we're trying to change our systems on how we support learning in all of our schools, how we support those students in the achievement gap and accelerate their learning across all schools, not just in one part of town, and how we better train our administrators, our instructional staff, and our non-instructional staff. I know that's been mentioned today. And so we're definitely focused on how do we change those systems. Sometimes it's start all over, or sometimes it's tweak and pull out what hasn't been working. So I'm sure that will be evident or not when we get our testing results at the end of the school year. You know, a couple years into this new state testing system, we're going to be able to establish a true baseline, which right now there's not. And so that will be forthcoming. But I did want to just remind people, we have opportunities for them to come join public meetings when we're getting ESSER and ARP updates that they can be part of and provide us their input. I would certainly like for the public to come on September 18th again at 4 p.m. for the half-cent sales tax oversight committee meeting to see how that operates in the sunshine. And then we'll make sure we advertise our 1 mil oversight committees. And I do like the idea that's been mentioned on the budget committee. We can public notice that and do that right there in the sunshine so everybody can participate in that as well. And so I just wanted to say there are a lot of good things happening in our schools. We're certainly focused on achievement. We started off in a better place this school year when it comes to actual vacancies across the board in the school district and long-term subs. So I would give a shout out to our school building hiring managers as well as our hiring team and HR that has just really leaned into that and all the things they did this summer to make sure we could do our very, very best in a time when the whole country is short teachers to actually try to fill our spots here in Alachua County. And so with that, I just say that I think school started off with an excellent start. There's a lot of great things happening in our schools and in our classrooms, and that's a tribute to our non-instructional, our instructional, and our administrative staff working in those schools and everybody else throughout the system that's working to support them, no matter which department it is. So I just want to thank our employees, and we've heard the comments today about places we can improve when it comes to the budget, and I'll be meeting with Mr. Burkett, and we'll see if we can bring some additional information to you next week. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Okay. Dr. Rockwell? Mr. Andrew, would you turn your light off for me, please?
I was just going to be ready with my goals whenever you are.
All right. I'm ready. So we'll transition into that. I don't have, Ms. Green, we have an agenda? Because I didn't get one at my desk here, and I didn't, what was it in here? Let's make sure I didn't get any public comment. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I did what we had in here. Okay. All right, Dr. Rockwell, go ahead. We're ready.
So I heard Mr. Andrews' goals, and I think that what you described are excellent goals, but they're very broad. And they're the kinds of things that, as we develop our strategic plan, would be like in that 3 to 5 year range, I feel like. Correct me if I'm wrong, what you're looking for, Ms. Surden, is something very measurable and targeted for this year. Is that?
That's what we need for this year.
Okay. So I actually brought 3.
Okay.
The first one I have is to improve reading scores, especially for underperforming students, by consistently implementing the district's comprehensive reading program that was submitted to the state as demonstrated with fidelity data and assessment data. And not having, I would defer to staff on what they think is a reasonable increase, but so we could say, improve reading scores by a percentage or a certain amount, but I would defer to the superintendent and staff on what that reasonable amount is. I think you have a better understanding of that. My second goal, similarly, reduce overall behavior referrals and the number of repeat offenders through consistent implementation of school and classroom PBIS systems as demonstrated with fidelity data and behavioral referral data. And again, I would defer to staff on what a reasonable reduction would be. And then finally, and I think this relates back to what my colleague, Ms. McGraw, was saying about we need cross-training. We need to have multiple people know how to do the jobs. When people switch jobs, we need a trail of how things are done. And I know that this kind of got a little bit of a start last year and has been something that Chair Surden has advocated for in the past, but I believe that a third objective would be to create procedural handbooks for each department that are aligned to board policy, and to demonstrate, once the handbook is made, to be able to demonstrate that the procedures are being followed with fidelity.
Thank you, Dr. Rockwell. Ms. Abbott, are you ready? Okay.
I didn't really write mine in the form of SMART goals, and I should have done that, but I didn't. But of course, student achievement is one of mine. And again, I think it's very important this year to focus on the lowest quartile and also the magnets. Because of the school that's going to be open next year, I feel like we need to have magnet programs where every child that qualifies is accepted into that program. And if it means expanding the programs, then we need to do that, because if we're not doing that, we're going to lose a lot of students next year with the opening of that new school. And then my second one is transportation. And I feel like we've got to have a goal, a SMART goal that's measurable, of course, to get our kids to school on time so that they can learn. And it kind of ties in with student achievement. If they're not in school, they're not going to be able to learn. And so those are the two things that I think are most important this year.
Thank you. Dr. McNeely, are you ready? Or you want me to?
Certainly, Madam Chair. I have two very short ones. We are already in the midst of rezoning. As you know, that's been a priority of mine for years and years. And so now that we are at this point, I'm hoping that we will have a final reasoning and much positive way of getting our children in their correct attendance zones and making that a priority. Secondly, I'm warning that we continue to apply academic rigor throughout our district, not just our SI schools, but all of the schools. And finally, closing that achievement gap. Those are my two.
And you all have just stole all the thunder. But of course, everybody knows if your discipline is not under control, your academics are totally affected. And so we want to make sure that we're looking at how we are addressing behavior issues in our schools, but also I ran on improving reading skills district-wide. That has to happen. And as Dr. McNeely said, we have schools that are A's and B's in the past and now, and the thing is, subgroups are struggling in those schools. And so the achievement is because that is what our constituencies, and I think about the community, that has been their focus on how. And of course, the zoning and the transportation, I totally agree with, because if they're not at school, then they cannot learn. And those are our FTE dollars that are being affected as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And so my two, I didn't write them as goals, as thing. I had really three or four. rezoning and strategic planning, I thought those are two given, but improving the reading scores was mine, and I really kind of correlated or wrapped that around us not having any D schools and going into the next year. But we didn't get a school grade this year, so I don't know if those grades will come late fall. Are we supposed to get grades? Can somebody tell me we're getting grades? Are they going to grade us for last school year with the first year of FAST? Are we supposed to get those like late November or something like that, late October, to have that? But I do think that, I think providing the opportunity for students to get in good instruction so that they can be accelerated and be on grade level, I think we should target that down to that. And the other is the budget situation. I think we have got to situate our budget such that we are minimizing withdrawals from the capital transfers over into general fund. I think we have got to get that down to where it's not the crutch that we're using to go forward. So I don't think we should have more than 3 or 4 of these right here. So we kind of got to come and coalesce around. I think we all agree on something around reading scores, right? So do we still agree on the rezoning and strategic planning being goals for this year? Because those are things that we're working on, and we got to get those done, because a strategic plan is going to be really key for our organization. And then the rezoning is something that is impacting us fiscally, financially, and getting that done has got to be top priority. So I think those two kind of push forward, and they're there. But the reading scores one I think is one that all of us agree on, and we have to figure out a way of reading and math. I agree with you, Dr. McNeil.
To me, I don't see how we're going to just stick to 2. You're saying 2.
No, I'm saying the strategic planning and rezoning, that's on the plate. That is there. And then we're going to agree on some of these other things here. So I think the reading, us improving reading scores for that we'll have to figure out, and maybe I meet with Mr. Andrew and Dr. Atru, however we want to do that, and we come back with something and we bring it to the board on how that would be a SMART goal, and we would measure that. So with the reading scores. I'm leery of putting the transportation as a goal because that's really operational. I think that's something that we have on the burner and that where we want to be. Or is that something that we want to be a goal for the district? Like our goals? No, this is for the district that we're going to give to Mr. Andrew to. That's an issue, though. Okay, transportation, and we have to figure out some kind of way of measuring that. And I like that we wanted to have some meetings, but we got to get these kids. You can't learn if you're not in school. Attendance and transportation and all that. It's all rolling in there together.
I wanted to say something about transportation because I mentioned it to Ms. Eunice. Although we're meeting individually with Dr. Rolls, I still think that it needs to come back to all of us. I want to hear what every single person up here had to say. And inasmuch that we're meeting individually, I still want to know what you think, what you're saying, so if we can do that.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. McNeely.
There's a tentative workshop scheduled for that. Will you be in town for that?
I don't have it down on my calendar. What date is that?
I believe the 20th, is that right?
Yeah.
At our
The
usual.
20th of,
Yeah, you'll be back then, I think, Dr. McNeely.
the 20th of September?
Yeah.
I don't have that.
Since our workshop for September would be tomorrow, but there was no agenda items, they weren't prepared, so Ms. Green and those asked about if we were available for 2 weeks later. So like you, Dr. McNeely, I was very concerned about having a one-on-one meeting simply because of what the challenges of that experiences, and so they are, Dr. Roll and Ms. Eunice are going to bring that back. Yeah. All right. So something around improving reading scores district-wide and especially for our SI schools. And then Dr. Rockwell, as much as I like, and you're right, I have been pushing for, advocating for that. I don't think that's going to, I think we maybe put that aside, and that may be something that Mr. Andrew works on. And we have that. So we have student achievement and the reading scores, I think, is that one goal or two? And then, but you all are saying the transportation, you think that should be another goal for the district?
I don't know if you have the same thing in your notes, but what seemed to have the most consensus was achievement, particularly reading, and then behavior and transportation.
Okay. All right, so we won't hash out like the specifics of how that we can develop that into a SMART goal, but maybe, Mr. Andrew, you and your team could come up with something. I can schedule something that we sit down and we meet and we come back, and then the board, we bring that back to our next meeting and we vote to agree on those things. Those three things, and well, to that list there, rezoning and strategic planning would be there, but then those three things there. Okay. Thank you all for bringing that back and for your feedback there. Okay. One last thing before we adjourn is citizen input. Mr. Foote, you have anybody on the phone? Any citizens in the auditorium? Citizen input? Okay. All right. Any other feedback from my colleagues before we adjourn before our next meeting? Okay, seeing none, we're adjourned until 6 o'clock.